thought I'd do this tonight for the poll line. This is someone I've been around the last probably 18 months, and it's been like a breath of fresh air to me in the sport. But we have South Australian race referee Angus Bajaya. So how you going tonight, mate?
Yeah, I'm good, Dave. How are you?
Excellent. Now, I'm not here to villainize you or anything like that. I'm actually here to pick your brain, man, because I want to talk about one thing in particular before we get into your backstory. It was the last round of the Australian Solo Series this year at Brisbane. And for the starts, you've actually had that little gate bit open. So can you tell the people at home why you would do something like that as an official?
Yeah, sure. So the fourth gate at North Brisbane was really tricky to see. So obviously I've got to keep a close eye on the starts and make sure that no one's rolling or anticipating the start. So opening the gate allowed me to do that because the position of the tower was quite tricky. So if a rider wanted to get right up against the fence, there was quite a possibility that I wouldn't have been able to see their tyre. So opening up the gate just allows for me to see any movement or any rolling. And thankfully, I think we only had one that night. So, so it did pay off in the end, which was good. But yeah, that's the reason for that. So
But everyone starts somewhere. So where did this all start for you?
from an official side, I mean, I rode Speedway when I was a kid. Rode down at Sidewinders Speedway when I was little. I rode the solos and a peewee. I started on a peewee, then went to the solos, and then things sort of went on hold for a bit there. And then I started when I was about 14. I started doing just some officials work with my auntie Lena, who works on the sign on at Gilman. She got me helping out there, so I'd put people's wristbands on and get people signed on and stuff like that. And then it sort of went from there, I suppose. Started doing some timekeeping and things like that. And I just, love the sport of Speedway. It's been part of my blood and history and family forever. So, just being involved in the sport's really important. And then an opportunity came along when I always wanted to do the flags. I was always keen on doing the checkered flags and all that sort of stuff. And an opportunity came about where I got to do that and take over from the guys on the start line at Gilman, and I took over from them for a couple of years. And then the day I turned 18, I started refereeing. So, been a journey since then. But yeah, so at the age of 30 now, I'm, 12 years into refereeing and, really enjoying it.
Now, a quick break with one of our sponsors, Mills Drainage in Western Australia. Please go support on social media. Go visit their website. If you've been a customer, leave a positive review. It all helps. Massive shout out to Clayton and Joe Mills for all their support. Like you just said, you've done 12 years of it, but you've only really been on my radar for probably the last 18 months, I'd say. And
Yeah.
it's very cool to watch how you conduct yourself at riders' briefings and that, because
We've got to just give some feedback for next year because we want to make this sport bigger and better than it is. So we appreciate any feedback you might have as well. Judy, what do you go?
again, I'm not here to be controversial, but I do see it sometimes where people basically say you're going to get along or you go, and that's cool, but there's a way of saying things and that. So how come you've got such a cool approach to being an authority sort of figure?
Well, I think it's all about a level playing field of respect, really. I think, riders come to race meetings and, the saying is fire up, get fired up. When you're an official, it's the opposite. It's you've got to bring a level of calmness to any situation. So I always sort of think about can I add fuel to the fire or can I diffuse the fire? So my goal's always been that, and so I'll always will say to people that everyone has a level of respect we've got to look after, and I'm going to treat you how I expect you to treat me. So obviously Facebook over the last few years has brought up a few things like, you'll get someone write a comment about you and then 5 or 6 people will jump on about that. And you can't control what people do, but what I can control is what happens at the race meeting and the decisions that I make. And then I'm always happy to talk to someone after the meeting if there's something they're not sure of or they didn't like what I did. More than happy to answer any questions they might have. So, I think being approachable is a really important part about being an official too. Obviously, if you're approached in the right way as well, which can be make or break it as well. But again, bring the calm to the fire and you get the result you want.
Now, I already know the answer to this question, and anyone that's been in Speedway knows the answer. Have you ever in the history of the sport heard of a referee going, "Oh, I'm sorry, I made a wrong decision. We'll change it"?
No, I haven't, but I won't say it won't ever happen because there's always, especially in the world of technology these days, we've got, particularly at my home track, Gilman, we've got video replays and things like that. So I won't change my mind, but I'll definitely hold off making a decision until I've probably had an opportunity to see a replay or something like that, But I don't think I've ever changed my mind about something. But there's definitely, if you're wrong, you work out you're wrong pretty quick sometimes. And at the end of the day, you only call it as you see it. And often the most reflective you'll be is on the drive home. I'll constantly be thinking on the drive home, was that right? Was I too quick on the starts tonight? Or did that rider really take that rider out? Or, you're always thinking on the way home how well you went. It's important to be reflective. You really need to think about how well or how not well you went, to try and work out if you had a good night or not. And the thing is to learn from it, if you made a wrong decision, I'll always try and find a replay of it and I'll sort of watch it and try and think of where I went wrong or sometimes, go, actually, I did get that right, and at the end of the day, most of the time you've got a split second to make a decision and technology's helped that. But again, even with the Australian Solo Championship, I didn't have replays at every venue. I only had replays at North Brisbane and Humans. So thankfully I didn't need it too much the other 2 rounds either. But it definitely helps to have it.
It's interesting because if you're someone like me who pays attention, your answer just then pretty much told me everything people need to know about you. You're reflective. You want to know if you can do better. You are someone who actually has the sport first as well as being fair. So it's very refreshing. That's the constant word that's been said about you in my circle of friends. And it is really cool. But I want to go through some rules because I've never read the rule book, man. I'll be honest. And
yep.
I do remember some instances, and I'm not going to bring up names or anything, but say, for example, if there's an incident, I don't know, I don't know if it's different for sidecars or solos, but if there's an incident before the first corner, what's the deal with that? Like, what comes into play and what can happen as a result?
Yeah, really good question. So the term first corner incident, basically there is no such thing. So there's no real rule that says if something happens in the first corner that you should restart with all 4 riders. The basic gist is that if the cause of the stoppage is you can't deem who caused the stoppage obviously, you'll most of the time you'll sort of put them back in if you can. So we label that as what's called an unsatisfactory start. So pretty much it's different. It's slightly different between sidecars and solos. You sort of, you've sort of got a bit of a window of tolerance as to how far you'll sort of let the first corner go as such. I have let all 4 back in on the entry to the back straight before. So just on the entry of the back straight, just because it was, at the end of the day, I suppose you've got to think of it in a couple of ways. A referee has to think of it like everyone wants to see 4 riders in a race, right? the other spectacle is my job there is to make sure that everyone's playing by the rules and that the rules are being adjudicated fairly. So judging those two things in mind, if I can label it an unsatisfactory start, I'll do that. Might not happen every time, but let's say if you've got 4 bikes come out of the start into turn 1 and the bike on gate 4 just rams into the fence on their own, weren't impeded by anybody, then the cause of the stoppage is obvious, isn't it? You know, it's the yellow gate, you're out, restart with 3 riders. So in that case, it's clear and obvious. But when it's not clear and obvious, we try and use it wherever we might be able to use it. But if it's a clear difference, then, you know, we need to exclude the person who caused the stoppage.
It's I'll probably chase my tail a lot during this, but it's actually interesting to see you walk through the pits at Gilman or any other track because I'll say it in my state and probably incriminate myself, but don't really care. There's always been those referees who are the only ones that do it and there's no one else that'll do it. And people aren't actually forthcoming to say hello. They're more just sitting back to not make an impression. With you, it's the opposite. I watch you walk through Gilman. I've seen you walk through Brisbane, and people are happy to say hello to you. So surely that's got to reassure you that people understand that you're being a fair referee and you're not there on a power trip. Like we keep saying, you're there for to make sure everyone's playing fair.
Yeah, I think it comes down to it comes down for me, like I said before, the level of respect. You know, like I'll always talk to a rider if they've got a problem with something I've done. You know, I'll always, if I'm wrong, or you know, I'll say maybe I did get that wrong, and I'll apologise. I'm sorry, but that's how it was. You know, and I think as a referee, you've got to be visible to the people you're refereeing. You know, at the end of the day, you are the one that's the buck ends with you. So, you know, like you've got to be around. People need to see you. People need to know how you operate. Yeah. So, I mean, like I've been around the sport a long time, you know, and I think there's that level of respect in that as well. People that have been around the sport a while as well, you know. Yeah. And you know, it's about, I think, you know, Jason Doyle summed it up pretty well at one of the rounds of the Aussie titles. He said, you listen to us. And I think that was a really interesting statement that he made, because I will always listen to someone. Doesn't necessarily mean I'll do what you want me to do, but I'll always listen. And I think that's a really important part too. I'll never shut someone off and go, I'm not interested, you know. It's about being open, and I try and be as transparent as I can with everything I do in terms of Speedway. You know, and that's a really important part is this is my decision, this is why I made it, and this is how it's going to be, you know. And people respect that, and I think that's the important part.
Yeah, and what a tip of the hat to you by one of our sort of greatest current riders. But as you were growing up with Speedway and that, who was like the hot celebrity sort of rider or someone that really sort of made you starstruck? Because for me, Sam Ermolenko, man, and seeing him at Brisbane at the start of the year, that was pretty hard to look cool doing that, man.
Yeah, absolutely. I think for me, like, you know, when I was growing up, you know, like I was a bit younger than like the Rory Schleins and Matthew Weathers and all those sorts of people. But I certainly grew up around that sort of era. And Nigel Sadler is also a relative of mine. He was quite a star at that age as well. So he was probably someone I looked up to as well. And I suppose at that sort of top international level, I mean, you can't go past Lee Adams and Jason Crump for me, you know, like it's absolutely, I was there when Lee won his 10th at Gilman. I was up in the box doing the timekeeping actually. So they were some pretty special moments. I was lucky enough to referee Jason Crump a few years ago. Doing those sorts of things has been really cool. But yeah, they're probably some of the highlight riders for me.
Look no further. If you want a construction company you can trust, you know they're going to deliver 10 times out of 10. Look no further than Cohen Constructions Townsville. Everything from patios, bathrooms, kitchens, roofing, renovations, new constructions and commercial fit-outs. Free, no obligation quotes. Contact the team at Cohen Constructions Townsville. Master Builders Queensland, proud member, QBC 152351990. Contact the team at Cohen Constructions Townsville. It's interesting, because you sort of peel the layers back a tiny bit, and we're all just Speedway fans, man. We're just doing our little bit that we can do, and it's really cool to see how people come together. But do you find that sometimes with your job, it's kind of like you're kind of the parent in the room in some way? There's always going to be someone who's a little bit cheeky, whatever. And does that transfer onto the track when either they're lining up at the tapes or things like that? Do you notice some people sometimes try and test you a little bit, or is it pretty good overall?
I think it's pretty good overall. Probably the bit that riders sort of test a little bit is trying to cop a practice out of you at the start of the meeting. When it's not an Australian title or anything like that, normally there's not a standard practice at a meeting. So they'll always come up and, ask you, can I have a practice? And you go, well, what do you want to practice for? And, they'll say, I changed the tyre or something, and you go, well, that's not good enough. So, they'll always try it on with you a little bit, but generally they're all pretty good. When it comes out onto the track, they don't really, they've all got race face on. They don't care who's up in the box really. They just race, to their hardest. And it's my job to make sure they do it in a fair way. And one of my big things that I've always pushed on about, more so in sidecars than solos, is the payback. So I've always been fairly hot on that, in that I always say to the riders at the riders briefing that it's my job to decide whether someone has impeded on someone else. It's not your job to, try and get them back or anything like that. So, I always say to them, if you don't see a light come on after the incident, then I've deemed it okay. But if a light comes on, I've dealt with it and consider the matter finished. And paybacks, I always say to them, if you're going to pay back, you'll cop it twice as bad as them, So I'm fairly hot on that. We did have quite a problem on that a few years ago with payback situations, and we had to jump on it fairly heavily because we don't want to see anyone get hurt, and those sorts of situations, they cause injury, and we don't want that in our sport. So
you are right, and sometimes, like I've heard of it around the traps, and again, I won't say any names, but people remember silly little incidents that happened years ago that no one cares about, and then all of a sudden, right, I'm going to get him or her back, and you think, man, the sport's dangerous enough as it is, let alone with people trying to T-bone each other or whatever, and you think, can you imagine if they did that payback and then that person was either lost the ability to walk or worse, I think you're nailing it on the head by saying the whole, if you do something, you're going to get double punished.
Yeah, exactly. Like I said before, we're the people that are adjudicating the races. It's not up to the rider to take it into their own hands. We deem it as we see it, and we expect riders to trust our judgment in that. And there are some riders that don't trust people's judgment, but that's I suppose the risk, we say at the riders brief, the risk. There's always some element of risk, and if you're happy to race under one of my meetings, then you trust my judgment to make those calls. You'd be pretty silly to take it into your own hands, I think.
Now, we talked about this via messages and that, but
Yep.
what's a typical race meet for you? So, what's the obviously the drive there, and then what are your sort of routines or jobs to do before the meeting even starts?
Yeah, I'm a fairly organised person. I'm very much I like things structured and in place. So I will normally start the preparation for a race meeting probably about 2 or 3 days beforehand. I will start to get my paperwork organised because obviously I have to submit paperwork to Motorcycling Australia or MSA. Um, and so I'll sort of start to get that organised. I'll normally get a program sent to me a few days before. So I get to have a look over the program. I hate flicking through the program because when you're up in the tower, there's just so much for you to think about. You know, you've got someone in your ear, you've got announcers saying things, you've got timekeepers saying things, you've got to record down your scores, you've got to go to your score chart. There's so many things. So preparation for me is the most important part, is just getting yourself ready. So I'll normally get to a race meeting probably about half an hour before the gates open, or if it's an Australian Championship, I'll normally get there an hour or so before the gates open. Arrive at the venue, meet the key people if I don't know them already. Always walk the track to make sure the track's safe. You've got to check the safety fence and the way the track's been prepared. And then I'll sort of, if I haven't done so already, I'll start to prepare a rider's briefing. So I've got a standard way that I sort of go through things. And then just if there's any other things that need to be mentioned at the briefing, run a practice if I need to, and then get on with the meeting. And then after the meeting, it's collect everything up, go see the riders, check in with a few people. How was tonight? Just get a bit of feedback. I think that's really important too. And then normally when I'm at Gillman, I'll sit in the office, in the pit office there, and just be visible. We technically have to stay for at least half an hour after the meeting, but I'm normally there, hour, 2 hours after the meeting, just sitting, waiting around. If anyone's got anything to ask me, and it's great when they come in, they shake your hand and they'll say like, good job tonight, or, those sorts of things. And then, the drive home, which, like I said before, is the reflection part. That's the important part. And then the next day, you're doing all the paperwork. So it's quite a little mission to get ready. I'd like to do a meeting. So, the paperwork sometimes can either be, an hour job or a 3 or 4 hour job. And if you've got accidents, unfortunately, that night, then you're probably in for about a day's work. So, but that's all part of the job, and I'm happy to do that. So, that's a day in the life of a referee.
Well, let's trade places for a minute. So, a day in the life for me, if I'm doing an Adelaide meeting, usually I'll leave my house in Queensland at 2:30 in the morning, and this is on the Saturday. And by the time I fly in, get myself organised, check in with people, most of the time I'm fixing a bike or something to someone. And then by the time we get to the track, you pretty much blink and the meeting's over. And then you don't really get to bed until sort of 2 or 3 on the Sunday morning, and then fly home pretty early. So I'm not complaining. I'm actually very spoilt because Gillman is one of my sponsors. But isn't it funny to show you the different opposite ends of the spectrum for the day of a meeting?
Oh, absolutely. It's full on. You're always like you'd go home just as knackered as I would. It's definitely a full on day's work, and it's certainly you get a good night's sleep that night anyway.
Well, I could talk forever to you about this stuff, mate. This has been unreal, but I'm really looking forward to kicking off my national season coming up, and I'm sure we're going to see each other a lot more. I'm so thankful that someone like you is in the sport on a national scene, because to me, it's made the sport more fair, and it's made the riders more keen to race, particularly under you, let alone with fairer rules and better ways of doing it.
No, absolutely, Dave. I really appreciate you having me on the show, and we'll see everyone around the track at some stage.
All right, mate. Well, thanks for being on the pole line.
Easy. Thanks, mate.